For years, I believed that our marriage was unbreakable, full of intimacy, passion, and the kind of intimacy that makes you feel truly seen. But one day everything changed. My wife, Elena, began to pull away. Her touches became cold, her smiles fleeting, and a mysterious silence filled the places where laughter once lived. Let's find out why this happened, because I began to notice subtle clues. For as long as I can remember, intimacy had been the heartbeat of our marriage. My wife, Elena, and I had built our life on closeness, late-night whispers, gentle touches, and the comfort of knowing that nothing could ever truly separate us. But slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, something began to shift. I started to notice the small, disconcerting changes, the way her hand would hesitate before resting on my arm, the sudden distance in her eyes when we shared a quiet moment together, and the coolness in her voice when she was asked to share something personal. It began on a rainy autumn evening. I came home from work a little earlier than usual, anticipating a quiet dinner and a night of our familiar routine. The living room was dimly lit, and soft jazz floated through the air, just as it had countless times before. But when I found Elena, she was curled up on the sofa with a book, her posture rigid and her face expressionless. I tried to draw her into conversation, to bridge the gap I felt growing between us, yet every attempt was met with curt responses and a polite, yet distant smile. The warmth we once shared was now shrouded in an inexplicable chill. At first, I convinced myself that perhaps she was simply tired, or preoccupied with something that had nothing to do with us. I rationalized that life had its ebbs and flows, and that a temporary distance could be weathered. But as days turned into weeks, the changes became more pronounced. Elena began to spend more time alone, retreating into corners of our home where she would sit in silence for hours. Our conversations, once rich with laughter and shared dreams, dwindled to obligatory exchanges about mundane chores and schedules. One night, as I lay in bed, I reached out for her hand, only to feel a cool emptiness instead of the familiar warmth. I pressed my palm against hers, hoping to coax back the closeness we once knew, but her hand remained limp, almost as if it were a stranger's. The realization hit me like a cold wave. I couldn't understand why she no longer sought the intimacy we had nurtured for so many years. Had I done something to drive her away, or was something else at play? In the following days, I began to scrutinize every little detail. There were moments when she would smile at me from across the room, but her eyes seemed to carry secrets I couldn't decipher. I noticed subtle changes in her routine, a new preference for solitary activities, a shift in the times she retreated into her private world. Even her touch, once so tender and reassuring, felt mechanical and forced. I found myself questioning every shared glance, every soft word, desperately trying to pinpoint when our connection had begun to fracture. At work, I tried to distract myself with tasks and meetings, yet my mind continually wandered back to home. I replayed our conversations in my head, trying to uncover a hidden meaning or a sign of betrayal, but nothing definitive emerged. Was it possible that the very foundation of our relationship was crumbling, that the closeness we once took for granted had simply faded away? Or was I the one losing the ability to truly see her, a victim of my own unspoken fears and insecurities? Late one night, unable to sleep and haunted by the silence between us, I resolved to retrace our steps. I searched for clues in our shared photographs, in the memories of happier times, hoping that somewhere among those relics of our past, I might find an explanation for the present void. I recalled the early days of our courtship, when every glance was charged with promise and every touch ignited sparks of passion. Now, those recollections felt like echoes from another lifetime, beautiful yet painfully distant. As the weeks passed, the questions multiplied while the answers remained elusive. I began to suspect that something deeper was at play, a hidden narrative behind the decline of our intimacy. Had Elena found solace in something or someone else? Was there a secret she was guarding that prevented her from drawing near, even as she shared the same home with me? I felt torn between longing for the closeness we once had and the creeping dread that our love story was not as simple as I had believed. Standing on the precipice of uncertainty, I knew that my search for truth was only just beginning. The emptiness in our bed, the quiet distance in her eyes, and the unspoken words that hung between us were clues in a mystery that would soon unravel in ways I could never have imagined. In the weeks that followed that rainy autumn evening, the subtle signs of distance in our marriage became increasingly impossible to ignore. I tried to convince myself that the chill in Elena's touch and the reserved tone in her laughter were temporary shadows, perhaps born from stress at work or the fatigue of everyday life. But every day, the gap widened, and the warmth we once shared seemed to recede further into memory. Mornings, which had once begun with a gentle exchange of sleepy smiles and soft kisses, now unfolded in a quiet, almost clinical routine. Elena would leave for work with a curt nod, barely meeting my eyes, while I lingered in the silence of our kitchen, watching steam rise from my coffee cup as if it were a metaphor for our evaporating intimacy. When we sat down to dinner, the table that had once been a place of lively conversation now served as a cold barrier between us, a stage where each of us recited rehearsed lines about our day, careful not to breach the unspoken chasm that had grown between our hearts. I started to notice more than just the lack of affection. There were moments, fleeting and almost imperceptible, that hinted at secrets hidden behind Elena's withdrawn demeanor. On several occasions, I caught her glancing at her phone with a furtive expression, as if the device contained the answers to questions I was too afraid to ask. Once, while folding laundry in the quiet of our bedroom, I saw her pause at a particular message. Her eyes lingered on it for several long seconds before she hastily switched to another screen. The sight sent a ripple of anxiety through me, though I couldn't decipher whether it was born of suspicion or my own gnawing guilt. Late one evening, as dusk crept through our living room windows in a wash of fading light, I attempted to bridge the growing distance with conversation. "Elena," I began tentatively, "I've noticed you seem different lately. Is everything all right?" Her response was measured, a soft, almost rehearsed murmur that left more questions than answers. "I'm fine, it's just been a busy week," she replied, avoiding the depths of my gaze. Yet, behind those carefully chosen words, I sensed an unspoken truth. The silence that followed was as heavy as the humid night air, leaving me to wonder if perhaps I was missing something vital. Driven by a desperate need for understanding, I began to observe the small details of our daily life with a scrutinizing eye. In the mornings, as Elena prepared for work, I noted how she meticulously applied her makeup, almost ritualistically, before leaving home. It wasn't that she had started caring more about her appearance, it was as if she was donning a mask, a facade designed to hide the inner turmoil that was slowly consuming her. I questioned myself, had something happened at work? Had I done something to hurt her, even unknowingly? I recalled the late-night conversations we once shared, where every whispered secret and shared laugh knitted us closer together. Now, those moments were replaced by solitary hours in which Elena would retreat into her own thoughts. One night, driven by an overwhelming mixture of longing and dread, I followed her to the study, a room I'd rarely entered in recent months. There, illuminated only by the glow of her computer screen, I saw her leaning forward intently, her face bathed in the blue light of the monitor. A single tear glistened on her cheek before she quickly wiped it away, as if the very act of vulnerability was a sin she could ill afford. My mind raced with possibilities. Had she found solace somewhere else, a confidant, a friend, or perhaps even someone more? Every time I tried to approach her about the change in our closeness, she deflected with practiced ease. "I'm just stressed," she would say, a vague explanation that never satisfied my growing need for truth. And yet, in the quiet moments when I was left alone with my thoughts, I couldn't shake the suspicion that there was more beneath the surface than simple stress or fatigue. I began to wonder if the distance was a mirror reflecting my own missteps. Was it possible that I, too, had contributed to the fading warmth between us? Memories of past indiscretions, a careless compliment here, a flirtatious glance there, surfaced unbidden. I tried to dismiss them as harmless mistakes, yet they gnawed at my conscience. Could it be that Elena had sensed something amiss long before I had, and that her withdrawal was a preemptive shield against the pain of betrayal? The thought was both bitter and terrifying. One fateful afternoon, while tidying up the study, I discovered a folded piece of paper tucked away in one of Elena's books. The note was brief, its words scrawled in a handwriting that was both familiar and strangely distant. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any word. I need space to find myself. The note, unsigned yet unmistakably personal, hit me like a sudden storm. Had Elena been trying to tell me that she was lost in her own thoughts, or was it a coded confession of something far more damning? I held the note close, my pulse quickening with a mixture of dread and desperate curiosity. Each word was a reminder of the deep, unspoken pain that had crept into our lives, a pain that neither of us had fully acknowledged. As I lay awake that night, staring at the dark ceiling and replaying the day's events, I realized that the silent signals of Elena's withdrawal were not isolated incidents but part of a larger, intricate tapestry of secrets. Every glance, every hesitated touch, every carefully concealed message hinted at a truth that lay just beyond my reach. I resolved, with a mixture of determination and trepidation, that I would uncover the mystery behind her distant behavior, even if it meant confronting the possibility that I might be a reluctant participant in our own undoing. With a heart heavy with uncertainty and a mind buzzing with unanswered questions, I drifted into a troubled sleep. The silence between us had grown deafening, and I was left to wonder, what was Elena truly hiding? And more importantly, would the revelation of her secret bring us closer together again, or shatter the fragile remnants of our love forever? In the weeks following that fateful discovery of the note, my mind became a whirlwind of questions and half-formed theories. Every day, I scrutinized our home and our routines, desperate to decode the silent signals Elena was sending. The quiet moments, once filled with shared glances and tender touches, now became a battleground of unspoken secrets. I started to follow the faint trails of her behavior like a detective piecing together a mystery that had become both personal and all-consuming. One chilly evening, as rain tapped softly against our windowpanes, I decided to search the study more thoroughly. Amidst the scattered papers and dog-eared novels, I discovered something that sent a shiver down my spine, a small leather-bound journal tucked away behind a row of old photo albums. Its cover was worn, the initials, E.L., embossed in faded gold, a name that unmistakably belonged to Elena. With trembling hands, I opened it, expecting to find petty grievances or mementos of lost love. Instead, I was met with pages upon pages of cryptic entries, written in a neat, deliberate script that chronicled her inner turmoil over the past several months. The journal spoke of restless nights, of a deep-seated loneliness that she could neither understand nor shake. Elena wrote about feeling detached from the life she had built, and described vivid dreams where she wandered through endless corridors lined with mirrors, a metaphor, perhaps, for her fractured sense of self. The entries hinted at an internal struggle, one that pitted her desire for intimacy against an overwhelming need for independence. Yet, as I read further, a series of passages revealed something even more bewildering. Elena alluded to a presence that seemed to pull her away from the warmth of our shared life, an influence that made her question the very foundation of our connection. I recalled one particular entry that caught my attention. It described a day when she felt inexplicably distant, a day marked by an encounter with a stranger who spoke in riddles about freedom, destiny, and the cost of closeness. The stranger's words were enigmatic, yet they resonated with her in a way that left her both enchanted and terrified. Could it be that Elena's growing distance was not entirely of her own making, but rather the result of an external force that had wormed its way into our lives? The idea was both absurd and arresting, and it sent my thoughts spiraling into a dark labyrinth of possibilities. As I pored over the journal late into the night, I began to notice a pattern, a series of references to secret meetings, unexplained phone calls, and long, solitary walks in the park under a full moon. Elena described these moments with a mix of dread and reluctant fascination, as if they were rituals through which she sought to understand a part of herself that she had long suppressed. Each entry ended with a sense of resignation, as if she was aware that the more she tried to cling to the remnants of our intimacy, the more elusive it became. The more I read, the more my own memories began to clash with her words. I recalled instances when Elena had seemed distracted by something beyond our everyday struggles, moments when her eyes would glaze over as if she were reliving an experience too painful to acknowledge openly. I remembered her long, lingering silences when I tried to broach the subject of our dwindling closeness, and how her responses grew increasingly vague. Now, in the cold light of her journal revelations, those moments took on a new, sinister meaning. Compelled by a mixture of desperation and an aching need for clarity, I decided to confront her about what I had found. One evening, after dinner when the house was cloaked in quiet, I gently asked, "Elena, is there something you need to tell me? Something that's been weighing on you?" Her reaction was subtle, a fleeting look of shock, quickly replaced by guarded sadness. I'm not sure how to explain," she murmured, avoiding my eyes. It was then that I realized the depth of her internal conflict. The distance, the silence, the careful words, they were all shields against an inner chaos I was only beginning to understand. But before any real conversation could unfold, an unexpected twist struck. A knock at the door shattered the fragile calm of that night. I opened it to find a man standing in the dim hallway, a stranger with an unsettling air of familiarity. He introduced himself simply as Gabriel, and, with a voice both gentle and commanding, claimed he had come to speak with Elena. I felt my heart hammer in my chest as I wondered if this was the same mysterious presence mentioned in her journal. Gabriel's eyes held a secret that seemed to challenge everything I thought I knew about our lives. I hesitated, torn between protecting Elena's privacy and demanding to know what he wanted. "She's not here," I said, my voice tight with uncertainty. Gabriel smiled, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, and replied, "I believe she left a part of herself here long ago. I'm here to help her find it again." With those cryptic words, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, more confused and alarmed than ever before. In that charged moment, the layers of mystery deepened. Who was Gabriel, and what did he have to do with Elena's growing emotional distance? Was he a harbinger of change, a catalyst meant to pull her out of a self-imposed isolation, or an agent of something far more unsettling? As I closed the door behind him, I realized that the truth behind Elena's withdrawal was not a simple matter of fading affection or hidden affairs. It was a puzzle filled with cryptic messages, enigmatic strangers, and a secret world that I had only just begun to glimpse. I sat back down with the journal in hand, the weight of its revelations pressing down on me. The search for the real reason behind her distance had morphed into an unexpected journey into the depths of her soul, a journey that might forever change the course of our lives. And even as fear and uncertainty swirled within me, a stubborn hope burned that maybe, just maybe, I could find the key to unlocking the mystery of her silence. That night, the echoes of Gabriel's cryptic words still reverberated in my mind. I lay awake in our dimly lit bedroom, replaying the encounter over and over. Who was Gabriel really? And what did he mean by, "help her find the part of herself she left behind"? My heart pounded with a mix of trepidation and a desperate need for answers. As dawn crept in, I resolved that the silence and mystery had to be shattered. Tonight, I would confront Elena. I found her in our living room, seated by the window with a distant look in her eyes. The morning light revealed traces of vulnerability etched upon her face, lines I hadn't noticed before, shadows of pain and longing that hinted at an inner battle. I sat down beside her, the weight of unspoken words pressing between us. "Elena," I began, my voice trembling with both anger and sorrow, "last night, someone named Gabriel came to our door. He said things I can't ignore, about you, about what you're searching for. I need to know what's really going on." Her eyes widened ever so slightly, a spark of something I couldn't quite read. Was it fear, resignation, or a secret finally about to be unveiled? After a long silence, she slowly exhaled, her gaze drifting towards the patterned rug as if it held memories of better days. "I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her tone fragile. "I've been struggling for a long time, feeling trapped, like I'm losing myself in our routine. Gabriel, he isn't just a random stranger. He's someone from my past, someone who showed me another way to be. Her words sent a jolt through me. I recalled fragments of conversations, vague mentions of a time before we met, when Elena's eyes sparkled with untamed freedom and passion. Another way to be? I pressed, searching her face for clues. Elena, I've watched you slip away, feel the distance grow, and I've been trying to understand why. Was it because of something you haven't told me? Tears welled in her eyes as she confessed, I've always been afraid. Afraid of losing myself in the demands of our life, of becoming just another part of the routine. I met Gabriel when I was feeling suffocated, when I thought I was losing the spark that made me, me. He reminded me that I'm more than a wife, more than the role I've been playing. Her voice cracked on the last word, as if the admission itself carried an unbearable weight. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, betrayal at the thought of her emotional escape, yet also an aching empathy for the woman I once knew so well. So, you've been chasing a freedom that I never realized you needed? I asked, my tone softening despite the turmoil inside me. Elena's eyes shimmered with regret. It wasn't about you or us, at least not entirely, she murmured. It was about rediscovering a part of me that I lost along the way. I began to feel invisible, as if my voice, my desires, were being smothered by the expectations of our everyday life. Gabriel offered me a glimpse of what I could be, the idea that I could reclaim a part of myself. But I never wanted to hurt you. I needed to feel alive again. I struggled to reconcile the two halves of our story, the couple who once thrived on closeness and warmth, and now two individuals adrift in a sea of unspoken needs and unresolved pain. The revelation that her withdrawal wasn't solely a rejection of me, but a cry for personal liberation, was as wrenching as it was illuminating. Yet, a nagging doubt persisted, was this newfound pursuit of freedom a healthy evolution of her identity, or had it become a chasm that threatened to engulf our marriage entirely? Before I could probe further, a faint sound of movement in the hallway distracted us, a soft knock at the door that seemed to echo our inner disquiet. I rose slowly, my mind reeling with questions and half-formed plans to mend the unraveling tapestry of our life. When I opened the door, there stood a small envelope addressed simply to Elena. There was no return address, only my name printed on the back in delicate script. I carried it to her, our eyes meeting in a moment of shared uncertainty. With trembling fingers, Elena opened the envelope and pulled out a single, typed note. The answers lie in the past you both have forgotten. Look closer. Her voice faltered as she read the words aloud. It was as if this mysterious missive had been crafted to spur us into action, to force us to confront not just our current estrangement, but the forgotten moments of our history that might hold the key to healing. In that charged silence, we both understood that the road ahead would be fraught with revelations, painful, unexpected, and perhaps, the very catalyst we needed to rebuild what was slipping away. Standing there, with the note clutched in our hands, I felt that the threshold of revelation had truly been crossed. The mystery was deepening, and now our shared past beckoned with secrets long buried. Would uncovering those secrets bring us closer, or would it shatter the fragile remnants of our love forever? The mysterious note had set us on a path into the recesses of our shared past, a past that, until now, had seemed like nothing more than a collection of happy memories and faded photographs. That day, after the envelope's cryptic message had been read aloud in a hushed, trembling tone, Elena and I agreed to retrace the steps of our early days together. There was an unspoken hope that buried among the relics of our youth lay an answer to the growing distance between us. I suggested we start with the attic, a place that held decades of memories in boxes, albums, and forgotten mementos. As we ascended the narrow staircase, the wooden steps creaked under the weight of years and secrets. Dust motes danced in the slanting rays of the late afternoon sun filtering through a small window. I could feel my heart thumping as we reached a large, battered trunk with our initials embossed on its side. It was as if time had paused here, preserving fragments of a life that once felt so vibrant. Inside, among yellowed letters and faded snapshots, we discovered a series of small envelopes addressed to Elena, in a handwriting that I didn't immediately recognize. One, in particular, caught our eyes, a delicate, cream-colored envelope sealed with wax. With trembling fingers, Elena broke the seal and unfolded a letter that transported us back to a time when our love burned with unbridled passion and innocence. The letter spoke of dreams and secret rendezvous, of whispered promises under starlit skies. Yet, interwoven with those tender confessions were hints of vulnerability and a longing for freedom that I had never fully understood. As I read aloud passages that detailed moments of joy and sorrow, something stirred within me. The letter was from someone named G, a person Elena had once described in passing as a kindred spirit during the early days of our relationship, a person who had ignited a spark of possibility in her. But the tone of this letter was far more complex than a simple love note. It was laced with questions about identity and autonomy, a reminder that even in the midst of deep affection, there existed a part of her that yearned to explore life beyond the confines of our shared routine. With each word, the past revealed layers I had never known. We found more letters tucked away in a battered journal, snippets of conversations, dreams, and secret hopes that Elena had once nurtured. There were mentions of finding oneself and the cost of holding on too tightly, themes that eerily echoed the silent signals of her recent withdrawal. I began to wonder if, somewhere along the way, Elena had been torn between the comfort of our life together and the call of a more elusive, uncharted self. Our exploration didn't stop at letters. We unearthed old photographs of us, smiling broadly in sunlit parks and sharing tender embraces at quiet cafes. Yet one photo in particular made my pulse quicken, a candid shot of Elena, her eyes bright and hopeful, standing alongside a stranger whose face was obscured by shadows. The picture, taken at a music festival on a summer night long ago, suggested an intimacy that I couldn't place. Was this the enigmatic G from her letters? Or did it hint at another chapter of her life, one that she had deliberately kept hidden even from me? As we sat surrounded by relics of our past, the attic grew thick with both nostalgia and a sense of impending revelation. Elena's hands trembled as she traced the faded ink on the paper, and I could see in her eyes the conflict of remembering something both beautiful and painful. It was then that she whispered, "I had hoped you'd never see these, that we'd leave our past behind." Her voice wavered between regret and resignation. I realized that the distance between us might not be born solely out of a lack of love, but out of unresolved parts of who she once was, a mosaic of dreams, desires, and burdens she'd carried silently. In that moment, I understood that the answers hinted at by the mysterious note were hidden in these forgotten chapters of our lives. The emotional distance that had plagued us recently was not simply a sign of fading love, but the result of a deeper, internal struggle, a conflict between the woman I married and the individual she had long yearned to be. Was it possible that rediscovering that lost part of her could either bring us closer or push us further apart? Before we could fully absorb the magnitude of what we'd uncovered, a sudden realization struck me. Among the letters, tucked into the back of a battered journal, was another note, this one in my handwriting. I hadn't remembered writing it, but the words were clear and haunting. Sometimes, to hold on to love, we must first let go of what we know. How could I have forgotten such a profound truth? Was it a moment of clarity I'd lost in the rush of everyday life, or had I been subconsciously preparing for the inevitable changes that time and unspoken dreams would bring? The attic, with its dim light and lingering dust, had become a portal to a past that demanded to be revisited. As Elena and I exchanged a look filled with equal parts sorrow and hope, I knew that the journey toward understanding was far from over. We had uncovered fragments of a truth that could either heal us or rend us apart. And though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: the answers we sought lay buried in our shared history, waiting to be brought into the light. That evening, as dusk draped our home in a muted glow, I felt the weight of every unanswered question pressing upon me. The attic's revelations, the letters, the forgotten mementos, and that cryptic note in my own handwriting, had shattered the comfortable illusion of our past. Now, standing at the crossroads of memory and possibility, I knew that the time had come for the final confrontation, a moment when all hidden truths would be laid bare. I found Elena in our quiet study, the soft hum of the evening light illuminating her face, which was etched with a mixture of resolve and sorrow. I could see in her eyes the conflict of a woman who had long been torn between duty and the desperate need to rediscover herself. "Elena," I began, my voice trembling with a cocktail of anger, grief, and hope, "we've unearthed so many secrets tonight. I need to know, what is it that you've been running from all these years? What has made you so distant that I couldn't understand why you no longer wanted to be close?" For a long, heavy moment, silence filled the room. Then, with a slow exhale that seemed to release years of pent-up emotion, Elena spoke. "I never meant to hurt you," she whispered, her voice fragile yet determined. "I've been caught in a storm of my own making, a battle between who I was expected to be and who I longed to become." She paused, gathering the strength to continue. "The letters, the journal, even that note. They aren't evidence of infidelity or betrayal in the way you might think. They are the remnants of a part of me I lost long ago, a vibrant, unbound spirit that dared to dream of freedom, adventure, and self-discovery." I listened, torn between the pain of feeling abandoned and the dawning realization that our shared distance was not solely a result of my shortcomings. Elena went on, "Years ago, before our lives became a well-rehearsed routine, I felt alive. I was curious, impulsive, and yearning to explore the world beyond the safe walls of our marriage. I met someone, Gabriel. He wasn't a lover in the traditional sense, he was a mentor, a mirror reflecting the parts of myself that I had buried under responsibility and predictability. His words awakened something in me, that to truly be close to someone, I first had to be true to myself." Her confession struck me like lightning. All along, I had been searching for reasons to explain her growing coldness, wondering if I had somehow failed her. Instead, I began to see that we had both been complicit in building walls fashioned out of neglect, unspoken dreams, and a mutual fear of change. I recalled the many nights I had retreated into my work, too absorbed in my own ambitions to notice the quiet plea in her eyes. And now, faced with the raw honesty of her revelations, I was forced to confront my own role in our unraveling intimacy. Tears gathered in my eyes as I realized that the distance between us was not the result of a single act of betrayal but the cumulative effect of years of suppressed desires and unspoken sorrow. "So," I managed, my voice wavering with emotion, "you weren't seeking someone else to replace me, you were searching for a way to find yourself again, to break free from the mold we'd both been cast in." Elena nodded slowly, her eyes glistening with regret and relief. "Yes. I needed to feel the fire of who I once was, to reconnect with that part of me that yearned for something more. I thought that if I could recapture that spirit, it might somehow fill the void that had grown between us." Just then, as if on cue, a soft chime echoed from Elena's phone, a message from an unknown number that she hesitated to open. With trembling hands, she revealed a single line, "Your journey to healing begins with embracing the truth of our past." In that moment, the final, unpredictable twist emerged. It wasn't just our personal demons that had conspired to drive us apart, an external force, a network of support, perhaps even a clandestine program dedicated to helping people reclaim lost identities, had been quietly nudging her toward this revelation. The mysterious Gabriel, the cryptic notes, and the carefully hidden mementos were all part of a process that neither of us had fully understood until now. The revelation left us both breathless. We realized that our separation had been engineered not only by our own failures to communicate but also by a subtle, almost imperceptible intervention designed to force us to confront the truth. In that charged silence, I felt a strange mixture of betrayal and gratitude. Betrayal, for the years lost in a web of miscommunication and denial; gratitude, for the painful clarity that now promised a chance at redemption. As the night deepened, Elena reached out to me. "I want us to find our way back," she said softly, "but we must first accept who we truly are, both the parts that long to be free and the parts that need each other." With a tentative yet sincere embrace, we acknowledged that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges and unpredictable twists. Yet it was also a path toward healing, a journey where the distance between us could one day transform into a bridge built on mutual understanding and newfound authenticity. In that final moment, I realized that the mystery of our fading closeness was not an unsolvable riddle but a call to look deeper into our hearts. The secrets we had uncovered were not weapons to tear us apart, but keys to unlocking a more profound, honest connection. The journey to reclaiming our intimacy had just begun, and with that, a fragile hope sparked in the darkness, a hope that, together, we might finally bridge the gap that had haunted us for so long.